Welcome back, deep divers. Today we are going all the way back, like way back, to ancient Israel. We're taking a deep dive into a chapter from the Bible, Leviticus 12.
Ooh,
Yeah, I
Leviticus.
know, right? Sounds a little intense. But trust me, this chapter on childbirth and purification, it's surprisingly relevant even today.
It really is. Leviticus 12 gives us a really unique perspective on how ancient Israelites viewed, the spiritual side of childbirth.
Okay, so let's break it down. What exactly do we mean by ritual purity?
Well, so in ancient Israel, after a woman gave birth, she was considered ritually impure for a certain amount of time.
Interesting. So is this like a hygiene thing?
Not exactly. It wasn't about being physically unclean. It was more about a state of transition, like almost a sacred period of separation before rejoining the community.
Okay, I'm starting to see. So how long was this period?
It depended. 7 days for a boy, 14 for a girl.
Oh, a difference there. Why is that?
Good question. Scholars debate this, but some think it reflects the societal views on gender roles back then. Maybe they saw the birth of a daughter as needing a longer period of, adjustment or reintegration.
That's really interesting. But we're not saying that's right, just exploring the ideas, right?
Exactly. Just trying to understand their world.
Makes sense. Now, the chapter also talks about specific offerings the woman had to bring for purification. A lamb. Or, if you couldn't afford that, birds.
It's like an ancient sliding scale, and it shows how they tried to make the rituals accessible to everyone, regardless of their economic situation.
So this sacrifice, whether lamb or birds, did it, symbolize something deeper?
Definitely. Sacrifice in this context wasn't just a transaction, it was about rededication to the community and to God, a way of restoring balance after a major life event.
So while we're not exactly sacrificing animals anymore, do you see any parallels to modern life?
Absolutely. I mean, think about baby showers, gender reveal parties, christenings. These are all ways we mark big life events and transitions.
It's true. We still have that need to acknowledge and celebrate those big changes, don't we?
We do. And there's another interesting connection here, too. That recovery period for the mother, it sounds a lot like an early form of maternity leave.
Wow. I never thought about it that way. That's fascinating.
Right, this idea of giving new mothers time to recover and adjust, it's something we still talk about today.
Yeah, it really highlights the fact that they understood, even back then, that new moms need time to heal and regain their strength.
Makes you wonder if we've lost sight of that a little bit in our modern rush world.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But going back to Leviticus, it's not just about physical recovery, right? That period of impurity, you could also see it as a time for a woman to reflect and bond with her newborn, to adjust to this new, identity as a mother.
That's so interesting because it reminds me of all the talk about mindfulness these days and the importance of self-care. Like maybe we're rediscovering this ancient wisdom, but just in a different way.
I think you're right. It's about slowing down, giving yourself space to process those big life changes. And you know what else struck me about Leviticus 12? It emphasizes the importance of boundaries. That separation period wasn't just about the mother. It was also about the community, respecting her space and vulnerability.
Right. It was about giving her the time and space she needed without, overwhelming her with expectations.
Isn't that such an important message for today, too? Thinking about how we can better support new mothers and families, not just with policies like maternity leave, but by creating a culture of respect and understanding.
It's about acknowledging that the postpartum period is sacred, a time for bonding and healing, and creating that protective bubble around both mom and baby.
Sometimes I feel like we've lost a little bit of that reverence for this time. Like we rush mothers back to work, back to their normal lives, without really acknowledging what a huge transition they've just been through.
You've hit on something important there. We could all learn from those ancient practices about slowing down and creating space for reflection and renewal.
Right. Honoring the vulnerability and strength of new mothers.
And perhaps we could all benefit from having more structured periods of reflection in our lives, not just after childbirth, but during other big transitions too.
Like creating our own modern-day rituals, right?
Mhm.
Rituals that are unique to us but still tap into that ancient wisdom.
Exactly. Rituals that allow for introspection, for processing emotions, and for reconnecting with ourselves and our community.
And that's what's so fascinating about Leviticus 12. While the specifics might seem outdated, the underlying principles are timeless.
Totally. And those principles can still guide us towards greater understanding, compassion, and support in our modern lives.
It's incredible how these ancient texts can spark such relevant conversations, even thousands of years later.
That's the beauty of exploring history and tradition. It gives us a mirror to reflect on our own practices and beliefs, to think about how we can apply this ancient wisdom to create a more meaningful and supportive society today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Leviticus 12, here's something to think about. If you could design a modern ritual for big life events, what would it look like? What would help people process, heal, and transition smoothly into these new chapters?
It's a question worth pondering. How can we, as a society, create space for reflection and support during those key moments in life? There's so much we can learn from these ancient practices, even if we adapt them for today's world.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into Leviticus 12. Who knew a chapter on childbirth and ritual purity could be so thought-provoking?
It really goes to show the enduring power of these ancient texts and their surprising relevance for us today.
And it reminds us that even though times change, those basic human needs for connection, for support, for meaning, they stay the same.
And sometimes looking back can help us find our way forward.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history and the human experience. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those minds curious.
Yeah, and it makes you think, like, how can we create those kinds of spaces, those intentional spaces for transitions in our own lives?
Right. Like we can take a page from the ancients' playbook, maybe update it a bit for the 21st century. Might not be about, lambs and birds anymore, but it's about finding ways to reconnect mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those times, those transitions, they aren't just about like external stuff changing, but, there are also those shifts happening inside of us.
And maybe that's the big takeaway from Leviticus 12. Even in this crazy modern world, so different from ancient Israel, that need for ritual, for connection, for really honoring those big moments, it's still there. It's still important.
Yeah, it's like a reminder. Times change, but being human, well, that stays the same. Joy, sorrow, birth, renewal, those are constants.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Leviticus 12. Who would have thought a chapter on, childbirth and ritual purity could spark so many ideas?
It's pretty amazing, right? These ancient texts, they still have so much to say to us today.
They really do. And it's a good reminder that even as things change, those basic human needs, connection, support, meaning, those are always there.
And, sometimes looking back can help us move forward.
So true. Thanks for joining us on this journey exploring history and what it means to be human. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.